Vanakkam. Hello friends. In the previous episode, we saw about the legendary Chola king Kochenganan. He ruled between 175 and 200 Common Era, and he is shown as the last of the early Chola rulers by K.N. Sivarajapillai, whose genealogy table given in his book The Chronology of the Early Tamils we have been following. Well, there are other Chola kings who do not find a place in the genealogy table of KNS. We have seen how there were early Pandya and Chera rulers who ruled over different provinces under a sovereign king, and some of them carried royal titles. How do we know this? Through the Sangam poems that sing their praise or that have been composed by some of these early rulers. Similarly, in the line of the Cholas, there were several rulers as revealed by Sangam poems. For example, there is a beautiful poem in Purananuru sung by a Solan Nalluruthiran with the very interesting title Eliyum Puliyum. The poem goes, Vilaipada Siridam Noki, Valai Kadir Valsi Kondu, அழை மல்க வைக்கும் எலி முயன்றனையராகி உள்ளதம் பழன் வலி உருக்கும் உளம் இலாளரோடு இயைந்த கேண்மை இல்லாகியரோ. A mouse collects mature grains lying around the field for which it has not put in much effort, and it hoards them in its hole, not wanting to share it. Similarly, there are men who earn without much effort and hoard their wealth, not wanting to share it with others. May you not develop the friendship of such men. A tiger who went on a hunt and killed a brave boar did not eat it since it fell on its left side. It rose again with all strength the next morning from its cave and hunted an elephant, making it fall on its right, and then partook of it. புலி பசித்தன்ன மெலிவில் உள்ளத்து உரனுடையாளர் கேண்மையோடு இயைந்த வைகள் உளவாகியரோ. May your days be spent with friends who have strength and who strive for what they desire and win like the bold tiger. Now that a tiger would not eat its prey if it fell to its left while on a hunt is a very peculiar trait recorded in several Ahananuru poems as well as in Purananuru and Nattinai, points out Vaidehi Herbert, whose excellent English translations of the Sangam works I have been referring to from learnsangamtamil.com. Sangam poems reveal not a minor but a major ruler by the name KOPERUNCHOLAN, Ko meaning king, Peru meaning great, literally the great Chola king. Again, a string of epithets that do not reveal a proper noun. The lofty poems rendered by the king himself in Sangam works and poems rendered by contemporary poets on this king reveal that he was a legendary Chola king like Kochenganan. And unlike the minor rulers, this king at one point of time definitely ruled with Urandai, that is Urayur, as his capital. It is ironical that he doesn't find a place in the genealogy table of K.N. Sivarajapillai, whereas Nilakanta Sastri in his book The Cholas shows him as a king proper. Nevertheless, KNS mentions, and I quote, the chronological framework is so interconnected and close-knit that there is hardly any room for filling in. So saying, he continues that KOPERUNCHOLAN probably came immediately after the time period of 200 Common Era up to which the table of KNS goes, and he adds that in future, if there was evidence to be found, then KOPERUNCHOLAN could be added to the genealogy table. KOPERUNCHOLAN was a great ruler and a friend and patron of many a bard as revealed by the Sangam works, and one of these bards was Andayar from a town called Pisir in the Pandya kingdom. Remember, we saw in a previous episode on the last of the Pandya rulers of how this Pisirandayar had sung a poem on a minor Pandya ruler by name Arivudai Nambi. Now this established Arivudai Nambi as a contemporary of KOPERUNCHOLAN. Despite being a citizen of the Pandya kingdom, Pisarandayar rooted for the Chola king KOPERUNCHOLAN, having heard about the king's impeccable administration and his great generosity towards fellow bards. In a very beautiful Puram poem, Pisarandayar sings, Nunko yarena vinavin yenko kalamarku aritha vilayal vengal. If you ask me who my king is, he is the great king who rules the prosperous lands where the kalamar, that is the field workers, drink filtered aged liquor and eat tortoise meat. They enjoy and make merry, forgetting their occupation and celebrating the perpetual festivals in the Chola land. Panar paidal sutrattu pasipahayagi, Koliyone KOPERUNCHOLAN. He is the enemy of the hunger of the bards and their suffering relatives. He is the great Cholan who rules from Koliyur. Koliyur being an ancient name for Urandai, these lines clearly establish the fact that this Chola king indeed ruled from the early Chola capital. Pottil Nandin Pottiyodu Keli Vayar Perunagai Vaihalum Nakke. He further sings, this king was great friends with the poet Potti and enjoyed his company day after day. Potti was a contemporary poet who was a very close friend of KOPERUNCHOLAN. Now the king himself was a great poet and has rendered 4 poems in Kurundogai. An exquisite Kurundogai poem goes, Arulum Anbum Niki Tunai Turandu Porulvayin Pirivor Uravorayin Uravor Uravoraha Madavamaha Madandai Name. The heroine tells to her confidant, my dear friend, forgetting love and grace and abandoning the one who partakes of these with him, that is me, his life partner, he is going in search of wealth. Now, if this is considered as wisdom, let him be the wise one. May we remain the ignorant ones. From the Puram poems 212 to 222, some sung by the king and some by his contemporary poets including Pisarandayar and Pottiyar, we are able to recreate the sad turn of events that happened in the life of this king. While KOPERUNCHOLAN was ruling from Urandai and his fame was at its peak, his 2 sons seem to have fallen into serious disagreement with him and plotted to overthrow him. They marched towards Urandai. Infuriated by their treacherousness, the father decides to face the sons in the battlefield. Herein entered the bard Pullatrur Atriyanar. Remember, we have seen in previous episodes of how these bards were not there to just render praise poetry on their patron kings, but to guide them and offer them advice whenever needed. And here, in a heart-wrenching poem, Atriyanar points out the catch-22 situation facing the king. If he goes to war with his sons and wins the battle, which means the sons would perish, who then will be left to take up the rule of the Chola kingdom after him? Well, if on the other hand the sons win the war, the king's name will be tarnished forever. So Atriyanar advises the king to embark on the most righteous course of action in a heart-wrenching Puram poem. The poem begins, Mandu Amaratta Madanudai Nontal Venkudai Vilakkum Viralkedu Vende. O victorious king who kills in ferocious battles with great strength and effort, you with a bright white umbrella that protects, if you think about it, the 2 men who march against you are not your ancient enemies. Herein meaning they are not the Cheras or the Pandyas. If your sons who have risen up against you think about it, they will know that you are not their enemy either. When you go to the higher worlds, the rights that you relinquish will be theirs by inheritance. If these youngsters who have risen up against your strength with thoughtless ideals lose, to whom will you leave your great wealth? If you lose to them, people who despise you will rejoice and you will be put to unbearable shame. So understand this and listen to me. Adanal, ஒழிகதில் அத்தே நின் மரனே வல்விரைந்து எழுமதி வாழ்க நின் உள்ளம். Destroy your martial courage, rise up fast, may your heart live long. அழிந்தோர்க்கு ஏமமாகும் நின் தாழ் நிழல் மயங்காது செய்தல் வேண்டுமால் நன்றே வானோர் அரும்பெருள் உலகத்து ஆன்றவர் விதும்புரு விருப்பொடு விருந்து எதிர்கொளற்கே. If the shade afforded by your feet, which is a refuge to those in distress, should not lose respect, and if you want the celestials who live in the hard-to-attain upper world to receive you with open arms, then you must act well. Taking the subtle advice from Aetyanar, the king contemplates ending his life and he captures his emotions in a beautiful Puram poem that begins, Seihuvam kollo nalvinai enave. I will give the translation by Vaidehi Herbert. For noble men with high aspirations, who because of their own actions achieve what they want, there will be pleasures in the upper world. It is not so much about attaining the pleasures of the upper world, but trying not to be born again and attain sorrow. It would be great to die with a faultless body, with one's fame as high as the Himalayas. So, in no subtle terms, the king reveals his intention to end his life, and so saying, he decides to sit facing north and fast until death, a practice known as Vadakirithal. Now, the king had great affection towards Andayar of Pisir, and though the two had never met each other, had developed a strong bond of friendship with him, a bond for which Pisirandayar ultimately gave up his life. KOPERUNCHOLAN sings, Tennam பொறுப்பன் நன்னாட்டுள்ளும் பிசிரோன் என்ப என் உயிர் ஓம்புனனே செல்வக்காலை நிற்பினும் அல்லல் காலை நில்லலன் மனனே. They say Andai lives in Pisir town in the southern king's fine country adjoining the Podihei hills. He is one who nurtures my life. Though he stayed away when I was wealthy, he will not stay away from me when I am in pain. So saying, the king continues with the next Puram poem, revealing his heart's desire to see his dearest friend once before he passes away. Ketal மாத்திரை அல்லது யாவதும் காண்டல் இல்லாது யாண்டு பலகழிய வழியின்று பழகிய கிழமையராயினும் அரிதே தோன்றல் அதற்பட ஒழுகல் என்று ஐயம் கொள்ளன்மின் ஆரறிவாளீர். O wise men, you have only heard but have never seen this poet over the years. Despite your faultless friendship, it is not likely that he will come. So saying, you doubt him, but don't. Innadu orkale nillalan, inne varuguvan, ஒழிக்க அவர்க்கு இடமே. He will not stay away from me at a time like this. He will come soon. Keep a place for him. So saying, KOPERUNCHOLAN sits north and starts his fast. Days go by and the king becomes weak with hunger and isn't even able to speak. The poet Karur Perinjadukattu Boodanadanar comes to see KOPERUNCHOLAN and takes his inability to speak to him as a sign of anger and sings a heart-wrenching poem. உள்ளாற்று கவலை புள்ளி நீழல் முழுவு வள்ளூரும் உனக்கும்மள்ள புலவதி மாதோ நீயே பலரால் அத்தை நின் குறியிருந்தோரே. O warrior who is wasting away your bodily flesh under the dappled shade of the tree in this river islet, you seem to be angry with me. There are many who have complied with your wishes and are sitting with you. From these words, we understand how many bards decided to fast until death and end their life together with their patron king. Something unimaginable in this day and age. From a Puram poem 218 by poet Kannaganar, we also understand how poets from very far and near came to just have one last look at their patron king. பொன்னும் துகிரும் முத்தும் மன்னிய மாமலை பயந்த காமரு மணியும் இடைப்பட சேய ஆயினும் தொடைப்புணர்ந்து அருவிலை நன்கலம் அமைக்கும் காலை ஒரு வழி தோன்றியாங்கு என்றும் சான்றோர் பாலராப. Looking at the learned ones gathered around the dying king, the poet here uses a beautiful simile. just like the precious gems that come from the mountains, the gold that comes from under the earth, pearls and coral that come from the sea, all coming from far off places, set together in an ornament, make a precious jewel. These poets who come from far off places, sitting around the king, form a beautiful congregation of immense value. Sandror Palaraba, noble people who have come to be in the company of the ennobled. So with all these bards surrounding KOPERUNCHOLAN to be near him when the end came, the king's dear friend, the poet Pottiyar, records a poem that captures the poignant moment of how the king passes away and becomes a memorial stone, a nadukal. Purananuru poem 221 begins, பாடுனர்க்கு ஈத்த பல்புகழன்னே ஆடுனர்க்கு ஈத்த பேர் அன்பினனே. It shows how the king showered gifts on the bards and the dancers in his court. அறவோர் புகழ்ந்த ஆய்கோலன்னே திறவோர் புகழ்ந்த தின் அன்பினனே. He was praised by the righteous for his just rule. His friendship was praised by the wise. Not considering all this, Kutruvan, the god of death, seized his life. Embrace your grieving families and come, O poets of honest words. Let us berate Kutruvan. Nanandalai ulagam arandai தூங்க கெடுவில் நல்லிசை சூடி நடுகல் ஆயினன் புரவலன் எனவே. For causing this wide world to suffer, making the man who sheltered us and took on fine faultless fame to become a memorial stone. Alas, the king passed away before his friend Andayar could come. Having come all the way from Pisir, Andayar sits in the place that was set aside for him by his beloved friend and gives up his life. Seeing this, Pottiyar records a poem in which he is amazed at the bond that developed between these two who had never even met each other during their lifetime. நினைக்கும் காலை மருட்கை உடைத்தே எனை பெரும் சிறப்பினோடு ஈங்கு இது துணிதல் begins the poem. It is amazing when one thinks about the king who decided to give up his life. Even more amazing is that a wise man who lives in another country, a man of renown, with friendship as his support, should come here at this sorrowful time. The pride of the king who said that his friend would come, and the wisdom of the faultless one who came and gave up his life. What will become of this world when it loses a king of long-standing glory who owned the heart of a noble man from the Pandya land? It is indeed pitiable. Now, Pottiyar too was desirous of giving up his life, and this is revealed in Pottiyar's Purananuru poem 222. Aral avir vayangilai polindha meni, நிழலினும் போகா நின் வெய்யோள் பயந்த புகழ்சால் புதல்வன் பிறந்த பின் வா என என்னிவன் ஒழித்த அன்பிலாள என்னாது இருக்குவை அல்லை என்னிடம் யாது மற்றிசை வெய்யோயே. Now, this and the previous and following poems all fall under a thurai, a subdivision known as கையறு நிலை, that denote poems sung in a situation of sadness upon the loss of one's leader. So Pottiyar sings, O king without kindness at heart, you chased me away, saying, come after your beautiful wife, who wears bejeweled ornaments and never leaves your shade, gives birth to your son. But it is not that you wouldn't have thought about me. Where is my place? He asks. So the situation is that Pottiyar's wife was carrying their child, and the king bade him to attend to his pregnant wife and prevented him from joining him in his fast until death. But Pottiyar came after his son was born and, singing another heart-wrenching Puram poem, sat next to the king's memorial stone and gave up his life. பலர்க்கு நிழலாகி உலகம் மீக்கூறி தலைப்போகன்மையின் சிறுவழி மடங்கி நிலைபெறு நடுகள் ஆகிய கண்ணும். They became shade to many and were praised by the world. When they could not achieve their goals, they sat down in tiny spaces and became eternal memorial stones. If those with ancient friendship, with closeness that sweet life desires, to have with the body come to them, they will certainly make space for them. So singing, Pottiyar too fasted to death and gave up his life. Thus, these poignant verses from Sangam literature reveal the greatness of KOPERUNCHOLAN and immortalize his name forever. The verses reveal a very high moral standard that is very difficult to emulate in this day and age. Thus, the rule of the great Chola king came to an end when we have no way of knowing. With this, we end the rule of the early Cholas and will continue with the rule of the early Cheras in the next episode. Vanakkam.